Hello, everyone. I am Solomon Lederer from Blockmatics, and today we're going to talk about Quorum, JP Morgan's private blockchain. And today we're going to be talking with Rafael Sarres. I hope I got that mostly right, who works mostly. Really excited to have you on because you're doing actually a real project that is, I think, going live soon to production for the Central Bank of Brazil. So maybe just to get started, what's been your kind of blockchain background and your, I guess, journey towards Quorum?
Okay, thanks, Solomon. Thanks for having me. I had a pretty interesting journey. I'm a teacher, a postgraduate teacher at IT security, and I have bumped into blockchain some years ago, and I have studied to teach my students. And around 2016, Central Bank of Brazil started a DLT project, a research project, and I joined the research group. And since then, I'm working with DLT and other innovative technologies.
Right. So, but you've been with the central bank for some number, 8 years or so, right? Is that right?
Yeah. I joined the Central Bank of Brazil in 2008.
Right. So how
I was working with computer networks before.
Gotcha. So how did you then, later, of course, we're going to talk about Quorum itself and how it works, but I'm really curious in how, exactly what you're doing with Quorum, and also even to start off, how did you first initially, I guess, either discover Quorum or decide to go with that as opposed to, I guess we can talk a little bit how Quorum compares to Hyperledger solutions or Corda or one of those. So how did that evolve?
Sure. Our first project was to research a business case inside Central Bank of Brazil to create a proof of concept, to try to explore DLT capabilities. So the first project we decided to try, it's called SALT. It's an alternative system for money transfer between banks, RTGS. And we decided to try to create a backup system. So in case our main RTGS goes down, the banks would have something to leave, something to change money until we fix the things. So this project...
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt you just for a second because somebody was commenting about the audio. Let us know. I'm assuming audio is working for everyone else. Okay. All right, just double checking on that side. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we were trying to solve this problem. So the main problem was we have two data centers, and if both of them go down, we would not have any working RTGS. So we thought, well, look at Bitcoin. It transfers money, and it doesn't have a central point of failure. Let's try that. And we started exploring some permissioned technologies. So the thing is, we explored some platforms. We explored Hyperledger, the R3 Corda, and Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
And we developed little proof of concepts on each of them.
Right. So you were just trying yourself, even running a straight, Ethereum node.
That's it. We used block apps.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. We have experience with block apps too. We've worked with them.
They're great guys. They helped a lot.
Yeah.
And we developed with block apps that's more pure. At the time was a more pure Ethereum implementation, and we had experience with Hyperledger and R3 Corda. And what we thought that we needed to have a network of peers. We didn't want any special node or special responsibilities in the network. So that's why we end up with Ethereum, the product.
Do you mean because, like in Hyperledger or Corda, you have sort of like nodes to manage membership or access? Or
no, in Hyperledger, yeah, we have some special nodes. They are called orderers, and they handle the consensus. So some nodes in the network need to have this burden, let's call this, have this responsibility to implement the consensus. So this is on a Hyperledger, the orderer nodes, and in Corda there are notaries. There are some special nodes to avoid double spending. So these platforms are great. They do the job, but we thought at the time it's not for that specific project. That's why we going with Ethereum.
And in terms of using, right, so that would explain why you're using Ethereum, but then in terms of using Corda versus the more, general or more, non-Quorum, I'm sorry, that's why you're using Quorum, but in terms of why you're choosing Quorum versus just the vanilla Ethereum, is that because did you need to use some of the private transactions, or was it just you're moving away from the block apps variety of Ethereum?
Yeah. When we developed with block apps, it's more about like a vanilla Ethereum at the time. We bumped into some problems. We needed private transactions. We need to hide some information, especially the balances of the banks. So we couldn't show how much money a bank has to other banks. So we could do this with a vanilla Ethereum implementation with some cryptography, but there always a chance of the data leaks. So we wanted we needed the information to be only accessible to when needed.
Gotcha.
So we end up discovering Quorum. It's basically Ethereum implements Ethereum protocol. It's a fork from the Go Ethereum implementation, and with an additional privacy layer. It implements a transaction manager that makes available private transactions, and private transactions are only sent to specific recipients that you define on the private transaction. So it solved a lot of problems for us.
And I'd love to we'll get into definitely some more detail about that in terms of sending a transaction that is only, for a particular recipient or list of recipients. But I'd love to talk a little bit more in terms of the project that you've built with Quorum. Is it correct that it's completed and it's something that is going live soon? And what is the project doing, and who is it for?
Great. So after SALT, it was a proof of concept. We published a paper on our site telling about the experience, and we decided that we need to go further. We needed to now have a production system, not a proof of concept. And we bumped into another business case that is in Central Bank of Brazil. That is, sometimes we need information that is stored in another regulator database. So we are Central Bank of Brazil, and there are other regulators like CVM, it's the SEC of Brazil, it regulates securities, and SUSEP, it regulates insurances. And sometimes we need information that only they have. And in the past, we used to exchange emails and
really?
Yeah, emails, telephone calls, memos, and paper. And this was a pretty slow and occupied some needed workforce for us.
Right.
So we thought, let's create a blockchain a blockchain system that it works as a hub for information exchange.
I'm wondering, Rafael, because a lot of people just in general, I mean, I guess here's a good opportunity to sort of explain or get into what advantage a blockchain would have versus some other distributed database. I mean, did you consider just in general having some shared database that they can either post the information or vice versa to get the information across? Because obviously you're going from a very old, I guess, a more manual system, with telephone calls and emails.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think everyone working with blockchain should make this question before starting.
Mm-hmm.
So we needed this. We had 3 databases, and all of them had some information that could be shared. So we came with the first idea. Let's create a single database, just a distributed database, where we copy all the data. And this comes with a lot of problems. Synchronization, we cannot be sure that the data is actual. And so we decided, let's make a bridge so we can create a query anytime to our internal database of the participant nodes. So the problem was we needed to store this in some kind of database, immutable, because Central Bank of Brazil was going to make a decision based on the answer, and it needed to prove that this information was really answered at that time. So it's possible to make it from a distributed database, digital signatures or something like that, but blockchain gives all that for us. We have provenance, we have proof of where the data came from, we have digital signatures, we have immutability.
Gotcha.
So everything is trackable, everything is auditable. So
awesome. Yeah. So you heard it there. I'm gonna extract that little clips. Anytime anybody asks me, I could say, well, here you have it from somebody who's actually at a national bank. So I guess the solution you have now, does that mean that those regulators, you're saying the CVM or CBM and SUSEP, are they now running a Quorum node, or is it they are?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
We actually created containers, Docker containers, and they run it, Docker image, and they run it. We distributed it, and they run, each one of them run a Docker container with Quorum, with the transaction manager.
Okay.
And beyond that, it's just a matter of opening firewalls.
So how many nodes do you have on your system?
We have 4. We have 3 regulators and 1 in the cloud that's for testing purposes only. We use it to test connectivity,
right,
and chain propagation, and that's it.
And are you using the private features currently, or will you be using the private transactions? So there are things that you only want to share with one organization, one regulator, and not another, or vice versa?
Yeah, we are using it. Because when we query, we specifically create a question that it's directed for one participant. Each participant in the beginning of the network publishes publicly, so right, everyone can see. All the data it's exposing. So and the endpoints, the OData endpoints are published on the blockchain. So every node can see what each node it's making available. So when we publish a request, this request is created as a private transaction, as a private contract, and it's only available for the requester and the node that must answer it. So no
Right.
other node can see the request. That's because even the requests have some sensitive information. We are questioning if a specific person has some problems with the regulator because he's trying to assume a high position on a bank.
Right.
So we need to do the due diligence about their past. So we are questioning about their specific CPF. It's the national number, identification number in Brazil. It's called CPF. So it's a sensitive information.
Right.
Because
it's amazing.
sometimes the market does not know about who is going to assume a position. So it's only focused, it's only stored between, it's only shared between the nodes.
Right.
Nodes.
Okay, amazing. And are you planning on adding more organizations or regulators or other banks to this system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because in the end, when we finished the project and we started deploying, we started receiving calls and requests because this information sharing problem is it is a common problem on every government organization. So we need information that is in other government system. And everything is difficult to share.
Mhm.
So we had contacts with the security public sector, the sector that deals with security, to share information. So I think it's a project that has a long future.
Right. I see somebody is actually asking, and again, we do want to get into a little bit of a discussion on Quorum itself. But in terms of, can you describe a little bit more? I mean, I think you kind of covered it, but they're asking if you can give a short description of the use case. So what, maybe a little bit more, I guess, on the information that you are sharing, or what would be a particular
Sure.
query? Yeah, just another.
Sure, no problem. Imagine that each government agency has an internal database, and it stores information about who has been punished for some misbehavior. And this is the information specifically for us. This is the information we need. So we needed a way to query the internal database of the other regulator, right? So that's the business case we are trying to solve. Instead of questioning and sending a memo, and this guy who receives a memo creates a query and reads the query and translates it to a new memo and sends it back. Let us get the information directly. That with digital signature, with provenance, and with auditability and immutability.
Right. So on their end, though, they still would have some system, it might even be manual, where they see those queries coming in through Quorum, they get the information, and then they would write that back to, I guess, the smart contract that you have, or in a separate transaction that they're deploying another contract with that information. Is that right?
Yeah, right now, as we develop it, it is fully automatic. It's fully the system, when the Quorum node receives a query, reads on that a query, a private contract has been written, and it's a query for me. I will read the query, and my Quorum node will make a conversation with another system that we have developed.
Right.
It's called Binda. It's a database translator, something like you receive a OData question and you translate for the specific database. I saw a question passing by about if every regulator has the same database, and no. That's why we have this translating layer. So the questions are made in your data endpoints, and they are translated to whatever database they have. So we have a translating layer. So after this information is retrieved, it is automatically and without any manual intervention, it's written on the blockchain, the answer.
Amazing. So that's even on the regulator side, they also have the integration between their database and Quorum. Okay, is that something?
That's another Docker container we have. It's Olinda.
Okay, is that something you built for them, or they actually implemented that?
No, we built. We built
okay.
for another project we have here in Central Bank of Brazil. We have what's called open data. So when you enter the Central Bank of Brazil website, we have a specific website. It's in Portuguese. It's called Dados Abertos. .bcb.gov.br. Then when you access this, you have all data endpoints about a lot of data, internal databases, like what is the exchange rate, what is the average Selic rate, the interest rate, the national interest rate, and historic database. So it's open. So we had already developed Olinda to make this translation internally for us. So we packed it and we joined it with Peer, and it's as a bundle right now.
Okay, amazing. So now I know there's before we get into the some Quorum questions, I see a couple of people are asking in terms of choosing Quorum over Hyperledger, and I know you talked about that before, so I guess some people are joining late. So I mean, the short answer is that you wanted all the nodes to be the same. You didn't want to have some differentiating kind of either auditor nodes or whatever they're called in Hyperledger.
I could add on this because as we needed peer-to-peer communication in Hyperledger, you had, and when we were developing Peer, you had to create channels between each of them. So we would have to create a lot of channels. It's like we had 10 nodes. We would have to have channels between each of them, and it's an administrative burden. And privacy in Quorum is much more straightforward. You just create a private transaction. You state for who it is, the recipient, and it's gone. The transaction is created.
So that would be actually a good segue into explaining a little bit, because you say you also do teach about blockchains and Quorum. So to explain a little bit, how do private transactions actually, how do they work on Quorum?
Sure.
Because we think about blockchain as everyone is seeing everything, everyone has exactly the same state. So now if I'm sending you, some private transaction, we need to, the data is not going to be identical across the whole network.
Yeah, it's important clarification. And in Quorum, we have the public state. It's a state that is shared between all nodes, and there is no way for a private transaction to change the public state, because, as you said, every node has the same information. They must access every transaction that changes the state. So the public part, it's almost the same of Ethereum, the vanilla Ethereum. But they created what Quorum team created is a separate state. It's a private state. So this private state, it's susceptible to changes by private transactions, and there is no consensus on this private state, because, as you said, the private state is different between nodes, because I can have nodes A, B, C. I can have a private contract between nodes nodes A and B, and node C wouldn't see the transactions itself. It wouldn't see that a private transaction has happened. It receives the hash of the transaction, but the state is different.
Right. So everyone just gets the hash of that transaction, and those hashes are included in the public state. So
Yeah.
right. So that, I guess, within those private transactions, you have the additional ability that you can always go back and at least prove that those transactions did occur, because the hashes are in the public state as well.
You would have to analyze case by case, but the proof
Right.
that the transaction happened is there.
Gotcha. Right. And how now? I know. So that mechanism, or that communication that happens separately, meaning that there's now a separate protocol to send private transactions, and which is called Constellation. But somebody was asking, actually, if you're using Constellation, is there an alternative to the Constellation? Unless I'm mixing up the consensus mechanism versus the communication protocol. But my understanding was, so can you talk about Constellation?
Sure. It's the privacy layer. It's the transaction manager, and we in Quorum we have two options. You can use Constellation, and you can use the newer version of the transaction manager. It's called Tessera. It's we actually use Constellation still, but we tend to move to Tessera. It's the newer implementation. It will be maintained. So I think if you're building right now, you should start with Tessera. Constellation
is there any what are the differences between the two? What are the advantages of Tessera?
I think they are almost the same, but Constellation was building C++, I think. And Tessera is built using Java, and that was a option. It was decided by the Quorum team to rebuild it from scratch. I'm not sure why, using a different language. I think because Java is more enterprise. It's more that should be easier to find Java developers and something like that. It was a company strategy.
I see. Okay. So now, in terms of the consensus mechanism, Quorum does have a few different options over there. Can you talk about the few different options, and then get into what you use? Whether it's Raft consensus versus some of the others.
Sure. So in vanilla Ethereum, we have the proof of work. They are developing other proof of stake, and we have proof of authority when you just trust someone. But you don't need that. You don't need proof of work in a permissioned network, because proof of work is needed because you don't know your peers. You have to protect your network from the CBO attack. So a single computer can act like several nodes. And so we need to prove that they only have one processor or some kind of processing power. That's why we don't need this in a permissioned network, because a permissioned network, nodes enter by invitation, and they must be approved by the network managers. So there's no unknown nodes. So the Quorum has
nobody regulating the regulators. You trust them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a governance system. You should have one for your network. And once the node is approved, it's known. You know that this node is from SUSEP, for example, for CVM or for Central Bank of Brazil. If these nodes misbehave, you can punish it. You can do something about it. That said, Quorum implemented two newer algorithms. The first one is Raft. It's a well-known consensus algorithm. It's good because it's quick. It's very fast. So transactions are mined very fast, but the drawback from it is that it's only crash tolerant. So if a node misbehave and tells something problematic, the other nodes will not have a way to know for sure that this node is misbehaving.
Right. So just to recap, so you're saying it's only good assuming everyone is honest. It will protect if a node goes offline, but if there is any, I guess, misbehavior, if let's say even one of the nodes gets hacked and then starts acting maliciously on the network, there's no way to, I guess, defend against that or protect against it.
It would be traceable, but the problem would happen for a short period of time until someone detects it and can do something about it. And so the other consensus mechanism is Istanbul. They developed it and they made it available after we have built Peer, so we may adopt it sometime in the future. And the good thing about Istanbul is that it's a Byzantine fault tolerant. So if a node, it has voting, if a node misbehaves, it will not, without network majority, will not make some damage on the chain.
Gotcha. So, excuse me if you've said this already, but so which one are you using?
We are using Raft.
Oh, you are using Raft. Okay. Are you any plans to move over to?
Yeah, we have a plan because Raft was the only consensus available. They have in the past. We have started really early with.
Right.
They had Quorum chain. It was a previous consensus mechanism. It's now not available anymore. It had been deprecated, and now we are using Raft. And we do not need a fast consensus. Our network, as you can imagine, is not that busy.
Oh, it's definitely faster than a phone call. So you're already orders of magnitude of an improvement.
Sure, and we don't need a lot of transactions per second. So for this specific use case, we can use Istanbul.
Are there, what are some other, I guess, parameters or configurations or decisions you have to make with your Quorum design and implementation?
Well, Raft is automatic. It elects a leader by itself, and if this leader goes down, so you don't need to play with it.
Yeah, I just posted on the site, I posted a link. There's even a visualization that explains how Raft works, the leader election mechanism, that there's a little pulse that goes out and the other nodes vote for the leader. And then, so anyway, all our viewers, you can take a look at that if you want to get into more details and how that works.
That's it. So Core is pretty straightforward. You join you approve the participation of new nodes. And as soon as they join the network, they participate in the voting mechanism for electing a leader, and a leader mines new blocks. I think the most, let me see, the thing that needed the most work was the governance. We need and the paperwork we needed to, because we are accessing internal databases, right?
Right. So when you say governance, you just mean you're outside. You don't mean blockchain governance. You just mean institutional legal governance.
That's it. Because infrastructure-wise, it's pretty straightforward. You develop the smart contract. This takes some time, but it's not difficult.
Well, how many people would you say are at the bank are working on the blockchain projects?
Yeah, we were 4. We were a team of 4. Great people, very competent. I think I was the least.
Oh, really?
Because they are really, really nice, and they developed all the interface. I developed the smart contracts. I built the infrastructure. I helped building, and a part of the team built the Docker image, and that we were 4. Now we are down to 2.
Gotcha. Oh, so I guess you're not planning on, I mean, because my next question was going to be if there are other areas that you now want to implement using a blockchain as well. So, and there's some other, I don't know, whether it's data sharing or some other processes to, or even to launch some private token, you know, sort of like what JP Morgan is talking about with the JPM coin. Is any talk about doing any other blockchain project?
Actually, our roadmap is to improve peer, and in a longer future, go back to Salt, to implement a backup system for our RTGS.
I see. Wait, and you say the current system that you're using now with the regulators, you call it peer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the acronym for a Portuguese. It's the platform for integration for financial regulators or something like that.
Okay.
In Portuguese, it's peer.
All right. Is there anything, you know, I think we'll start closing out and we'll just take some of the questions that are coming in. But just to close out the part in terms of for other people that are looking to implement and build something similar to what you've done, were there any sort of hurdles or other pain points or other decisions that they should know about that, you know, that you've learned through experience?
Yeah, what I would share is that prepare for some bad times, because because it's a new technology, and we had some difficulties dealing with it. And I can share just one of these, because when you publish a transaction on the blockchain with Ethereum, the public Ethereum, you're not quite sure if it happened, or if it had some mishap, it went out of gas, or if raised an exception. And until the recent fork, we couldn't query the network. Did my transaction really went through, or did it fail? Because when a transaction fails, it is written on the blockchain, but it does not change the state. So we didn't have a status to query. And we tried some things like debugging and seeing if we could find a revert command in the middle of the transaction, and we crashed the node and something like that, trying creative things like that. But after the fork, the Ethereum team, and it was quickly ported to Quorum because it's a fork, so I think it's to port it. It was quickly ported to Quorum. We had finally a status to query. So prepare for some mishaps, but it's evolving very fast. It's evolving very fast.
Right.
Now it's much better than when we started. When we started, it was like pioneers, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing what you've already built. I wasn't actually aware that you were this far along. I know initially when we spoke, I wasn't even sure that there was an actual project that is essentially live at this point. So, I mean, you did mention a really good point in terms of in general about Quorum, that the advantage that it does have, say, over some other blockchains, is that it is following Ethereum, so that it can quickly take advantage and implement all the features and changes that are happening on the public Ethereum. Those can be quickly ported over to Quorum as well.
And it's based on a base code that is battle tested, right? You don't have a worse thing than the public internet. It's like being among the worst of the worst, receiving all kinds of attacks. So when you start with this base code, it's a nice thing. We have written about this advantage in our document.
Yeah. Are there other, also on that point about getting into bugs or trying to debug, and are there other tools that you've been using in conjunction with Quorum that have been helpful? I mean, even if it's front-end tools like MetaMask or, what else do you use with Quorum?
Yeah, you use Truffle,
Mm-hmm.
integration tool, and we developed it using Remix.
Okay.
It's online.
Right, the web browser, web ID.
Yeah, it's ID. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, very cool. We use it a lot in our classes as well. Okay, cool. So let's just, I guess, take some of the questions. I see there's a question on the bottom in the Ask a Question. I can read that one first. How easy is it to change consensus mechanisms? Like, would that be?
We haven't tried yet, but as far as I know, we have to start over the network. We have to start the chain over.
Right, and then
I know I'm not quite sure about it because we haven't gone through this pain yet. But you would need to archive the last blockchain and maybe keep in a separate network for only for queries, and we would need to start a new blockchain.
Gotcha. And we'll go for the from the bottom up. So Ramiro asked, how should we approach the scalability aspect? Are you hitting into any scalability issues? Or?
No, because we are quite aware of this, but of the scalability I wouldn't say problem, but limitations of technology. That's why I talked about the other platforms. There are ones that scale better, but then on the other hand, they have special nodes, but it's up to the project to choose. So exactly with Peer, we don't have any scalability issues because it's a pretty slow going network, like 1 transaction a day to 5 transactions a day. So we don't need to worry about this.
Right. Okay. And then finally, I guess, well, there are 2 questions from Jay. One is, does Quorum strictly follow the EEA spec?
As far as I know, they are they have the roadmap to follow it.
Right. I believe that's true too, especially since, I mean, Quorum is almost like the flagship product of the EEA.
That's it.
And do you, as an entity that created the blockchain, have control over the nodes that can join the network?
That's a great question. No, we don't have. As we told you, we have a governance. We have a off-chain governance, and we have an on-chain governance. We have built a smart contract that controls who can access a specific contracts. The network join we must be approved by a node, and it should be by consensus, the governance process to approve a new node.
Right. So, but you're saying technically, it sounds like any node would be able to invite in additional nodes, but you do have some external, I guess, legal or governance process in terms of that you really would require everyone to be okay with it.
That's another point that we think should be improved in Quorum. So a system that would require a consensus about network new nodes. Any node can give a command and approve another node.
I see. Right. So you would like to have it so that it's unanimously approved.
Oh, unanimously is a vote-based, majority, or I don't know, a network. Each network is different. Okay.
Amazing. All right, so maybe we'll take those questions offline. I mean, that's up to you, Rafael, but I know we're coming up on 45 minutes. I just want to tell everyone out there, number one, thank you for joining. On our side with Blockmatics, we run a webinar roughly every week or so you can check out our history. You can look at our YouTube. We also have online courses on about 15 different blockchain platforms. So check out blockmatics.io. You can also, at the very least, sign up for our newsletter. We send that out once a week as well, something really interesting that's happening in the blockchain space. And of course, all the social media stuff as well. Rafael, is there anything you want to leave our audience with in terms of, how they can find or the work that you're doing, et cetera?
No, we have a paper out. It's quite old right now, but it explains some of the things we have done. So I think you should link it. I will send you the link, and you could put it.
Yeah, definitely.
And no, other than that, it has been a pleasure.
Okay, excellent. It has been a pleasure here as well. And yeah, I'll post the link both over here, so people can always watch the replay over here on Crowdcast, the same URL, and also it's going to live on our Blockmatics YouTube page as well. So all of you can always watch it. Yeah, so I mean, I will let you. I mean, Rafael, if you'd like, you of course you can type in those questions on the side later. But I know we're already 45 minutes in. But thank you very much, and hope to talk to you later.
Great.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.